Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Top Tier Tiers podcast. I'm Alfred Young, and with me is my intrepid co-host Tom.
Hello.
Yes. Now oh God, it's been a long day for me. How are things over in California?
Uh, I slept a lot today. Trying to fix my sleep schedule. Um,
Sleep is good.
yeah. Uh, my weekly D&D session got canceled today because the DM was feeling a little under the weather, which is why we get to record this earlier my time than usual, which is
Neat.
nice.
I agree. It is nice, and it's very,
How'd
very
your interview
helpful to be
go?
able to. So Tom knows what's going on, but I just had a interview for a new job because the medical profession interviews extremely far in advance. Uh, and by extremely far, I mean like just every year during interview period. It was okay. Could have been better, could have been worse. The interviewers were 10 minutes late. I was worried that I had not accepted the interview invite properly. In other news, I finally read the first Game of Thrones book.
Oh,
I've
wow.
I've just not read Game of Thrones before. I've not watched it. I don't know anything. The writing is very, very flowery, and I mean that in the nicest way. It's like song lyrics on a page. It's actually quite enthralling, honestly. So I
Yeah.
don't know if that means I'm going to watch the series, but you were saying?
Uh, well, on the series, it's probably not worth watching the TV show, if I'm going to be honest.
I've heard bad things about the uh what
Like
do
if
we
you're
call it? The
the what did you want to call it?
the finale. I've heard bad things.
Yes. Um I feel like I mean if you're okay with stopping like let's say mm, season was it season 4, season 5 where where they started to like basically there's a point where at which they stopped adapting existing material and started writing slightly I guess unreleased material. I would say I don't know if it was original because I'm pretty sure most of like the plot was laid out for them by George R. R. Martin. But basically, once they got past where the books are, it started getting really bad. So
I will probably just read the books. My brother very courteously bought the whole set and then moved out, so I'm just going to help myself, and
nice.
we'll see how it goes.
Hope you're okay
uh,
with the series never finishing because that is definitely never getting finished.
I am not too fussed. I mean, I just finished the first book, and it was like I don't know, that was a good place to end, but it was certainly a place to end. Um, yeah, well, we're talking about Game of Thrones because I don't think either of us had too much to add in the on the Weiss side of things, if I'm
Hmm.
to guess,
that
and
might
that's
change.
fine.
We're gonna,
Not
didn't
didn't Quince
tournaments
just
are
come out,
happening.
or
Quince
did
just came
Quince come
out.
out?
Tournaments are
Yeah,
happening.
UK.
Tournament Quince was not legal for BCS Houston, which is why no one played it. If anybody
Hmm.
was confused as to why Quince did not top, uh, but I mean, I'm sure we'll have a lot more to talk about once more BCSs started happening.
Yeah, it's definitely a good deck. I think that there's going to be a little bit of variety in the build to begin with, but I think it'll slowly move towards what the Japanese players were having, which is fine. That's just what happens when you tune a deck.
They do
I
test a lot more than we do, I think, in general.
do you
Like,
want to know something? Like the night before Rego for Houston, Riaz Mohammed, one of the world champions, he just PM'd me and he's like, "I'm playing Danmachi," and I'm like, "Okay, what deck you? What's the build?" And he sends me over a stock list, and I'm like, "Nah, you got to build to beat Hololive. Like you can't not do that at this point in time." So I send him my list, and lo and behold, he makes top 8 with a list he has never tested before. Uh, the guy's a monster.
pretty good.
Um, yeah. The deck, I think, if you tune it the way that I tuned it, is pretty good against Kanata Marine. I think that you still have issues against most of the 1k1 soul decks, in particularly things like 8 Choice Slime and the Coronet Marine, I think is also a problem for the deck to some degree. Depends how much they depend on the level 0 Aqua. But I think that ignoring that, I think I probably have one of the better builds of DDM right now. But, DDM is not the most relevant deck of all time.
It might continue to be because
Uh,
people are definitely playing a lot of Mushoku right now. So.
it's a really good deck, and if you want to see my build, just look at Riaz Mohammed's topping build. It's strong. I think the Eyes early play is really good against Kanata Marine, and I think it is also good against Mushoku Tensei, especially bad NTI players. So yeah, give it a look. Outside of that, BRO happened. We had an Australian taking Europe, and I did an American take America.
Yes, Hansen won. Pretty
Oh,
sure.
good on him.
Yeah, it's a
Good job
victory
to him.
for NorCal, dude.
Nice. Shout out to him.
He just moved to NorCal like 2 months ago, but we claim him as one of our own.
That's only when it's convenient to you, it appears. That's
New York can go.
words for New York. But look, fair enough.
He's
I
ours
think
now.
that. Sorry.
He's ours now. No
He's
takebacks.
yours now. No takebacks. I feel I hear that there's another prominent player moving back to California. Maybe that'll
Oh yeah.
yeah. Oh well. Anyway, gossip is just gossip. Uh, Pleasantries out of the way. Today's topic is a interesting one. I'm gonna lay a bit of background for why the topic even exists. So the community for Weiss is one where there are many. Uh, there's a lot of banter. To put it quite lightly, it can be a very toxic place at times. And at one point in the past 5-ish years, Tom here had the opinion that a certain type of card was overrated. He said Azusa is overrated. So I took it upon myself to relentlessly bully him at every opportunity to remind him of how Azusa is not overrated. And at that time, look, I mostly stand by it, but I think that as the times changed and moved towards 2018, 2019, the game changed, and the idea of Azusa being overrated may have just been Tom being ahead of the curve. Who knows? Let's set the scene first, though, because some people, look, I expect most people listening to this know what Azusa is, but yeah, some people don't, and I think it's probably better to set the scene anyway. So, back in was it 2016? When did IMAS movie come out? I forget.
No, it's not 2016. Is it
Whatever.
2016? I think isn't it
It may
2015? Wasn't it 2014?
2014? That doesn't
Yeah,
sound right.
because it came up before Ilya's Y, which was the first set of 2015.
You might be right. Anyway, let's set the scene a little bit. The effect Azza is when this card comes to play from hand to stage, you may pay cost. The cost is to discard a card. If you do, look at up to 4 cards from the top of your deck, reveal a traded or color or level X character, level X or higher, level X or lower, from among them, add it to your hand, and the rest go to discard. Basically, it is a stock-free mill 4 that allows you to discard a card for free, and that is a benefit in this game, and also gives you some level of mild selectivity in addition to filling your graveyard a little bit. Maybe one of the more important things it does is it gets you through your deck pretty quickly. The first iteration of Azusa was not actually Azusa. It was actually was it in Disgaea or was it in Gargantia?
It
I
was
don't
just
remember.
Gaia, I think. It is Etna, right?
Sure. I believe so. So the first iteration of this ability was on a 1/1 support in the Disgaea set, Disgaea D2. So it was an Etna, a green card, It wasn't really played in that deck because that's not what the deck wanted to do. It already had ways to discard cards, and at that point in time, the game wasn't so aggressive that you needed to mill violently.
Also, paying one
Next,
for that effect is
oh yeah, it's
not
like
very
it is
good.
a Etna was an ancient assist. So basically it gave 500 in front per number of assist characters on board. Assist being the actual keyword. I'll have to look at that again, but I'm pretty sure that's what that did. The next iteration of this ability came in Suisei no Gargantua, or Gargantua on the Verdurous Planet. It was on a 2-1 blue main character whose name I forget, and it had some other minor ability. I think it was like power on the opponent's turn or something. This was also not particularly good because, well, it's just not a particularly strong card. That deck wanted to press the advantage more than not, and level 2 is a little bit late. I don't think that's a particularly great time for that to be the case. So enter Imas movie, which, what was it, Beyond the Brilliant Future or whatever it was called. That set was actually pretty powerful for the time. It contained quite a number of really strong cards, including a few that see play even today, and also the ubiquitous Azusa. Literally Azusa. I think the card name is like Azusa Towards a Brilliant Future, Beyond the Brilliant Future. I'm pretty sure it's the title of the movie. Every
Um, maybe I don't remember actually.
it's neither here nor there. Every character got one of those. And in regards to that, Azusa's, I think, is the
Oh, it's the
one with the longest.
song.
Sorry?
It's the
The song?
song at the end. Yeah,
Sure.
I think so. I think.
I believe it. I haven't actually watched the IMAS movie. I was meaning to, but I never got around to it.
It's like
Anyway, I hear it is It's and I'm going to take that as Tom being okay with Idolmaster Xenoglossia for forever and
what?
ever and ever.
Oh God.
So in that regard, Azusa was a landmark card because at this point in time, this was a time where mill was not free, not fast, and not frequent. The vast majority of decks would not refresh until well into level 2, unless you dragged the game out with side attacks, at which point you would still probably refresh around level 1 to 2.
That was gonna
While
change. That was gonna change pretty soon though. This was like,
very, very,
yeah,
yes,
end of 2014 was like a pretty interesting turning point for the game's design as a whole.
I would say so. So the big change in game design here was that cards went from being mostly about value to being a lot more around the concept of playing climaxes. When I say that, what I'm trying to say is that before climax combos were things that just were kind of there. They existed, but they weren't the goal for decks, nor were they necessarily something that you would rely on to be a major part of your game plan. There are, of course, exceptions. For example, I mean, Haruhi obviously wants to use its obviously it wants to use its finisher climax combo. Zero Note's Kaima loved to play its climax to get that extra bit of value in, and all sorts of sets use their climaxes, but not to the point that was about to happen. What changed was that the set Nisekoi was printed. Nisekoi was the first set to have a widely available plussing combo at level 1, where climax play was encouraged every single game. The reason why this is important is because that was not the case until that point in time. The prior best deck, which was Kantai Collection, did not encourage a climax play early, but it turned out the best way to play that deck was aggressively as hell. The reason for that is while the deck didn't have a plussing combo, it had a number of cards, all of which plussed.
Well, it had
These
Shimikaze,
would
but
Sure, it had Shimikaze, but at the same time, after the Shimakaze turn, you were incentivized to play climaxes as much as you could. The reason for this is because they had a card called Hibiki, which when it died, you paid 1 to replace it with 106k. It had Murakumo, which is a card that comes into play and you can pay 1 to bond back a 1/0 counter, and you can pay 2 to salvage a card. So you can turn 1 card into effectively 3. And it had Yukikaze, which was like a coin flip card that saw a lot of play towards the end of Kantai's reign, while before Junyo was banned. And Junyo was basically a climax on a body. You just
Yeah.
play it, and everything you have gains +1 soul. And it maybe even more importantly, you had an actual finisher. But the point is, the game was not super fast. It was a little fast, but not super fast. And then Nisekoi came, and every deck wanted to be fast. The thing about Weiss is that the time where you are most vulnerable to eating a butt ton of damage is the first deck, because you can't control your compression, you can't control your refresh, and you certainly can't control how much damage the opponent's going to do. They're going to play a climax and you're just going to have to eat the 2-3-3 that comes at you. The way to circumvent this is to get through your first deck as quickly as possible in order to make sure that you have a slightly more compressed second deck facing your opponent's repeated plays of climaxes, or if you're a deck that gives up field, your opponent's direct attacks. This is where Azusa becomes actually prominent, and Azusa didn't actually become super meta in the IMAS set. She was most prominent in the Kantai Collection 2 set, where she was printed on, what was the card, like Akatsuki,
Akatsuki.
Midwinter or something like that.
Yeah.
So Akatsuki is just literally, it's just Azusa. It is exactly that, but it looks for ship girl characters. And as a result, Kantai now had a bunch of incredibly powerful plussing cards, an incredibly strong milling strategy, and it still had the really powerful finishes it had before. So the reason why this matters is because at that point in time, very little had the Azusa profile. The main milling was through brainstorms, and at that point in time, most brainstorms were tap 2, or they weren't selective, or they didn't plus. So they were not only stock inefficient, but sometimes they were limited to a certain number of times a turn. Azusa comes into play as a main game plan strategy at level 0, and not only discards climaxes, but mills you 4 cards, gives you a bit more selectivity, fills the graveyard with targets for your door climax, or whatever other climax you're playing, and overall is just an incredible amount of utility in one. For perspective, I'll list some of the strongest discard outlets at that point in time. 0/0 Marika from Nisekoi comes into play, discard a climax to salvage a character. Comes into play, check top, leave it on top, or bin it.
Very
That's
modern card.
still a
Very
pretty
modern card, actually.
relatively powerful profile. It's not dissimilar to the Toka in Data Life, but this was the gold standard of discard. And if that card is like a 6 out of 10 in terms of what you can do with it, Azusa at that point in time fulfilled an irreplaceably powerful role of milling, and it was your discard outlet, and it didn't cost stock. This was an era where Persona 4 played a card that read, on attack, you may pay 1, ditch a card to search a level 1 or lower character. That's how desperate some decks were for discard outlets. But Azusa just gives it to you completely for free. So at this point in time, every deck that just had actual no strings attached Azusa was immediately considered to have good utility. It's in that sort of environment that a lot of people started playing Weiss and got used to Weiss in a modern sense. Eventually, we started getting lots of cards that just milled, and we got a lot of cards that let you brainstorm multiple times a turn, primarily the tap brainstorms that plussed you, in addition to climax combos that also milled you. So while the necessity for a costless milling outlet like Azusa became less and less prominent, it was still an incredibly slot efficient way to use level 0. For the cost of 3 to 4 deck slots, you got a level 0 that can be played in any deck, that immediately discards a card, immediately gives you a check of the top 4 to find the best card. That's some selectivity. Mills you for no stock cost, and attacks at level 0 where everything is expected to die anyway. In addition to sometimes color fixing. Like the one in Idolmaster definitely color fixed for a number of cards. So, why did you say Azusa is overrated?
Right.
Let's start with
Yeah.
the set where that started being more prominent, which is
Yeah.
Idolmaster Cinderella Girls.
Yeah. So I said this sometime in 2017. I don't know if I said in the Discord. I said it for the first time December 16th, 2017. It was right after the Cinderella Girls bans. But we were also I think the topic was mainly about what
Well,
it
let's
ended up being about like good level 0 profiles, or how like level 0 profiles have changed the game. And
uh very very briefly, let's just talk about those bans because they do
yeah, sure.
matter. So the restriction put on Idolmaster Cinderella Girls included that set's Azusa profile, which was
Yes.
Shibuya Rin, a level 0 blue that Azusa for blue characters. The other bans were, as I recall, a level 0 Miria, which was a Ricky profile, come to play, pay 1, clock 1, search level 1 or lower, and was
Power
it
Smile.
Trancing? It was Power of Smile. So the
Power
level,
Smile.
that's the level 3 finisher,
Restender.
right?
Yeah. Yeah. Pretty
Yes.
rare
So
ban, actually. They usually have not banned restricted cards like that, but they did it for Cinderella Girls.
yes. So that was quite a strong ban. And when people were thinking about which particular card you would pick for your choice, a lot of people immediately gravitated to the level 3 because that's kind of the payoff for the deck, right? You do your stuff, you early play, you sit there for a few turns, and then you Power of Smile 5 times or 6 times or whatever, and your opponent is unhappy. But there were definitely proponents of every single camp, including Ricky and including Azusa. So, with that context in mind, uh, why did you say Azusa was overrated?
Uh, I thought it wasn't the choice for Cinderella Girls, and that was mainly because uh, I thought choosing Azusa just made the deck a lot less special, a lot less relevant. Um, so I was a proponent of probably Power Smile at the time, or Ricky. I think they removed Power Smile at some point as well.
Yes,
Um,
and it added Kome.
and they replaced it with Kome, yeah, because it turned out
Kome's
it turned out
nonsense.
you could just play Kome with you just play Kome instead of Asa in the old shell with choosing Power Smile, and it was like really good. Um, but yeah, I think I was never, and even after that subsequent ban list, I was never a fan of the
Azusa
Azusa
profiles.
choice. Yeah, of the Azusa choice for that
Okay.
deck specifically. Um, like after Power Smile got taken off, I felt as if Ricky or Kome were better choices because I felt like they were more relevant. They were more integral to the deck's main game plan, which was building the Tribe Primus board and cycling the stocks over and over again until you hit level 3. Um,
Yeah, so tell us about that. What do you mean by game plan?
yeah, so I mean the deck has a clear goal, clear focus, right? So pre-bans, the deck was focused around getting this brainstorm, the now and the 1/1 Karen out, which created, you know, uh the zeros
Good board.
the yeah, a great board, but all they basically turned on abilities for each other, like a global 500 and global level assist, as well as like making the early play exceptionally large. Um, but
We're talking
uh,
like 14k,
yeah, something like that.
15k.
And obviously, Azusa is a good card, right? When I say Azusa is overrated, I don't mean it's bad. But if we're talking about, if we're talking about the deck's game plan of getting those cards, right, those very specific cards, the 0/0 brainstorm and the 1/1 climax combo out onto the board as soon as you're at level 1, I didn't think the Azusa helped the deck do that, uh, as well as the Ricky did. Um, and if we're talking about like the other part of the game plan, which is looping the climax combo, which is the 1/1 search, the 1/1 lets you give omniverse search to a character when you play the stock soul. I didn't think the Azusa helped as much as the Kome did in that regard. All the Azusa did essentially was provide, hand
Mill.
fixing, hand fixing, which are good things, but I felt as though a good portion of the hand fixing could be replaced by like the inclusion of other cards, and I thought that the deck had enough mill, with the search brainstorm that milled 5. That was like very special at the time.
Still is, honestly.
Um, as well, like, and there were, it's okay. Cinderella Girls is a huge set. There are tons of cards. There's so many cards. A lot of cards that could offer, a bit of extra mill plus hand fix, like the Arisu from set 2. So I felt like the people that were prioritizing Azusa were losing sight of what the deck was really meant to do, and they were just gimping themselves by like insisting on including this profile that it's supposed to be so good. Every deck wants Azusa, right? We've like that's been memed, like that's like been like people talk about all the time. Top 10 card, like top 5 cards you want for your old ass set, like that'll make it better. And everybody says Azusa, but like the thing is, at the time, Cinderella Girls wasn't a bad deck. It was a deck that had a really strong game plan, a very clear identity that Azusa didn't really help as much as these other cards on the choice list. Which is why I started feeling that it was a bit overrated. That people were making themselves worse by insisting on prioritizing this profile. That they weren't thinking about like function in their deck slots. They weren't thinking about like, well, if my deck got restricted and Azusa is one of the hits, and I don't choose Azusa, like what can I do to kind of approximate the function well enough to get by, so my deck can still have its identity, but without having to sacrifice too much of the fact that it can't run Azusa anymore. So that was like the initial seed that got me to start thinking, yeah, maybe this card's just a little overrated. Like, feel like people aren't prioritizing their deck building properly because their perception of this profile is warping their choices. And I don't know. I think I was right back then. I think I still am.
Yeah, let me correct something. I looked up the actual history of the ban list. The first ban list hit was Miria, Kome, Power of Smile, and
Oh,
Azusa
I
was
see. I
added
see.
after that. At which point it's a choose one of 4, and I think because going by that and also going by the dates of where I started posting things like, "Look at me, I'm Tom. Azusa is overrated." Uh, that is when you first said that sort of thing. It was
Yeah.
eventually cut off, but at that point in time, I think another really important question is Azusa versus Kome in that deck. I think Kome is incomparably stronger.
Oh, I think Kome is way better.
Yeah, it not only requires you to discard up front, not doesn't require you to discard up front. So sometimes it's just a mill
Yes.
4, right? But it also gets you the more important card in the deck, the stock soul, which was the big part of why that deck was so formidable at that point in time. So to clarify another point, it's not like you're saying Azusa is bad. Like
No.
Monogatari at that point in time another extremely prominent deck, and a key thing that both Monogatari and Cinderella Girls had at this time was both of them had a Riki and an Azusa-like effect. Monogatari's was level 1, for whatever that's worth, but it was still costless, and unlike the level 0 Azusas, the level 1 Hitagi actually had 5k power, so it could actually do a little bit of stuff in the mid game. Both of those existing really did make the deck strong, and because the bans eventually hit the deck on other fronts, those cards weren't enough to carry them. Like, ultimately, Azusa is just consistency, and while consistency is really strong, when every deck is already super consistent by default, that's not necessarily what you're after.
Right.
So, with that in mind, let's talk about how things have actually changed since 2016, because
Yeah.
milling is really important right now, still is, always has been. Monogatari played a 0-0 that just milled 3 and oftentimes did nothing else.
Yeah, I would
And
say the
Azusa,
nature of Azusa is overrated. If we're gonna, I guess I'm gonna refer to it as like a slogan or something. It has changed since 2017. Uh, not in like, well, one because they haven't printed an actual Azusa in a very long time, but also because uh, what do I call this? The convergence of not a convergence. They basically Bushro just essentially has started putting a bunch of effects. They've started combining effects uh into level 0 profiles.
let's so to clarify, I think it's less that they're combining effects. They are, like, they literally are. They're taking effects that could be on 2 different cards and putting them on one and taking away like 1,000 power. But I think what's more important to note is that they're conserving deck slots.
Yes.
Multiple effects, which like a lot of effects do largely the same thing. So mill 3 and on def mill 4 check take 1 ditch 1. They both mill. They both effectively mill. Come into play discard a climax to salvage a character, and the Azusa effect, and come in play draw drop all fulfill the discard. Like, all of them do that. Drop searches are selectivity, they're an early stock out, and they are discard. That's what we mean when abilities are kind of combined. And in this case, Azusa is a stock-free discard outlet and a stock-free milling card. These two are extremely important effects for most modern decks. There are exceptions, of course, but every deck wants access to this. And it's because of that, at that point in time, I mentioned the Marika earlier, the one that just has ditch to salvage as well as top check to put on put in bin. That top check thing is not required. That card is basically just a discard climax, salvage back a card that matters. If that was the gold standard at the time, think about how compelling a card that, if printed in 2022, would be a serious consideration as a 4 of. I don't think Tom or anyone really would ever say Azusa is a bad profile. It simply does too much for that to ever be the case. Would you agree?
Yeah. Um but
The question here, however, is there a better configuration of cards that can do what
right.
Azusa would want to do anyway? And I'll let you talk about it because you obviously have your own thoughts on this.
Yeah, I mean, so I think so
Sorry, I think you
Dex
cut out there.
yeah, sorry. I'm thinking about how to phrase this. So Dex used to um kind of struggle to generate resources, I think. Is that inaccurate? Like back then? Um like uh a lot of decks back then would never dream of playing a profile like pay 1, send a waiting room, check top 3 or 4, add 1. Um but as I guess I guess the real culprit is standby. As standby has been as a concept has been fleshed out and developed in their card design over the years. Um, it turns out that like having a stock out, especially early, that also hand fixes you and or provides some sort of selectivity, has become kind of important. Um, because stock as a resource is less, I guess is more plentiful. It's either more plentiful for decks, or in some decks case they use a lot less stock than they used to. Would you disagree with that? I think finishers have gotten more efficient, less stock intensive. They're essentially more bang for your buck now than they were back then. um
Absolutely. I mean, things even as early as Talavru, where you just got a costless finisher attacking and oftentimes
right.
killing the opponents. And now we've got stuff like Buzz and Woody, which is it's very cheap for what it does.
Yeah, so I would say, uh as the game has developed, as Bushiroad has, as they design decks, in these sets, they have explored, certain possibilities, uh, that have opened up due to their, evolving card design, and they have created decks that might not need like, well, they've created decks that function fairly well and are very good even without something like an Azusa, essentially. Um, and of course, since they're not printing Azusa anymore, like how many modern sets have actually had to make that choice? Like, would a modern set decline to use Azusa if it had it available? That is a little hard for me to answer, I guess. But
I think some decks definitely would. For example, standby decks, where
right,
you never want to have your milling source or your discard outlet or whatever be an actual card that stays on the field. You'd rather wall up as much as possible. So with that in mind, people have taken to playing events that mill four instead of Azusa, or they just brainstorm every turn, or they play a card that sacks itself to mill four. I
I
think
think
standby decks and
Danmachi.
yeah,
I think Danmachi might be another deck that would decline.
Danmachi literally has the event quote unquote Azusa.
Right, but
I
like
don't.
it wouldn't. It
The
doesn't
thing
bond
is,
for it or anything. So
I
like,
think I think the reason, so we can talk about Danmachi actually, because that's a deck I have a lot of familiarity with. The costless discard is taken care of because the brainstorm lets you draw drop, so that's incredibly simple. And you want to play climax basically every turn, so that's the other discard outlet. As for mill, you've got a 0/0 that just mills three. Your level 0 is basically Kome Light, and that is incredible. And then one of the events that the Kome can fetch, as well as the events that your level 1 combo fetches, is 1/0 mill 4. So in terms of costless milling and costless discard, Danmachi already has everything it needed. If it had a red Azusa that got a familiar trait or whatever, it probably wouldn't play it because there's no space for that sort of role. And if it was played, it'd be as like a one-off, and I even think that would be questionable. I
right.
think Danmachi is an outlier though because it has a pretty much a literal analog to Azusa. The Hestia event Kome thing is basically Azusa. You
Sure.
just don't pay up front.
Um,
Uh,
we could talk about Dal maybe, since
uh,
we briefly mentioned standby. Um,
I think
Dal.
eight choice Dao would probably play an Azusa type effect.
Hmm.
Eight wind might also, because that deck wants to stabilize to the point where it can play multiple of its level 3 and then just attack and start mising people with double top decking.
Would a
I
choice run
think
it? Wouldn't it prefer to run the on death Kome thing?
it might. I think that it might want to just aggro out pretty quickly. That's a good question. I'm not intimately familiar with 8 choice Data Life. if anyone has opinions and is familiar, then please
I
comment by all
mean, I
means.
mean, do you know the card I'm referring to?
I actually don't.
So it has a 1/0 on death Kome. It's like a on death Kome that checks for yellow climaxes. Mills 4. It can sack itself to pump 2k to something.
Pretty
Um,
good.
essentially, yeah. I mean, essentially, it synergizes. I think it synergizes very well with the typical choice combo, choice level 1 combo of choice.
Yep.
Which is, you know, which as most people know is a extremely good, extremely
Uninteractive.
uninteractive, typical +2 on attack, like card advantage engine, which I think synergizes very well with the nature of the Kome, because you know I think all the deck really wants to do is just loop that combo over and over and over again, which the Kome does, and the -1 you get, -1 you cop from using the Kome's sack effect is offset by the fact that your combo pluses a bazillion every time you use it. So um I feel like in that deck specifically, you know, does Azusa provide, like, I guess you could argue that you could run both, but then, you know, uh, it's a lot of slots used on what is essentially just milling. Like both the Kome
Hmm.
and the Azusa do the same thing. You're essentially using a lot of slots. If you choose to run both, you're essentially using a lot of slots on like the same thing. Which,
And let's not forget that that Azusa is a really terrible body to leave on the field. It never
yes,
wins any combat. Whereas the Kome you're describing sounds like it can actually contribute to, yeah, well, maybe not often, but it can contribute to winning field,
I mean, 2k
which
power is a lot of
matters.
power. But
Mhm.
yes. But yeah, I would say, you know, not only have level 0 cards gotten better in the amount of functions they cover in the same slot, I would say brainstorms have also gotten way better since 2017. Back in 2017, you know, we were all talking about the now brainstorm as being the next big thing. Pay 1, rest 2, mill 5, search brainstorm. Unheard of at the time. So special that you needed to build an entire deck around, you know, that card to make it work.
Well, it's not that we built the entire deck around it.
Yeah,
Bushiroad built the
yeah, yeah.
entire deck around. Yeah.
But you know, since I guess Osamatsu was the first really good tap self brainstorm. Is that the
Uh
case? It might
yeah.
be. It might be Puyo Puyo. I mean, like, Puyo Puyo also had a tap self brainstorm. I think that was pretty good. Is a tap.
Osamatsu is a really good example because it's a deck that played for Azusa.
Yes, it also had tap self search brainstorm. It had a lot of like very modern cards actually for its time.
Hmm.
Um,
Uh, I do think that once people learned to play around the girl, then it became a lot less good. But
yeah,
you
it
know,
never dominated. I don't think it ever like
it
was
had
super
some
good.
results,
Yeah,
but it
it
was
had
never
its
like a
yeah.
top tier deck.
Mm-hmm.
So this is in spite of having Azusa, in spite of having a really good level 1 combo.
That's true.
This didn't dominate. What could that mean?
Um,
Well, I think what it means is that it's just not that Azusa is ever a bad card. In fact, I'm still of the opinion that if deck has Azusa, the first prototype of every deck should run at least 3 to at least see how it plays. But Azusa is no longer a reason to play a set. Like, even Fate, which is the most recent deck to have an Azusa type effect on the ban list. The reason you played Fate is because your Azusa also fulfilled the role of a plussing level 0 because of Avenger. And that is a
and
completely different role.
it's one of the last, or it's one of the rare modern sets that had a plussing free fresh, which the odds
It
you know synergizes
Yes.
with very well.
The value of controlled mill in main phase goes up exponentially when you have a payoff as strong as that, or a payoff as strong as, say, D-Side's Free Fresh, which is a set I think would run Azusa, but
That's true.
that's.
Yeah, I think D side would win ours. So yeah, that's a good point. But
I think it does. It is just a really powerful consistency crutch, and the question therefore remains: how much consistency do you need before it starts becoming a burden on your deck building?
Yeah, and man, I think that. Do you ever
Take
feel
your time.
like, man, you know, we used to think that I used to have trouble cutting lists back then to like,
Mhm.
cutting cards. I didn't finding cards, finding slots, right?
Yeah.
But in decks that have more than 50 cards, as like an initial draft. But I feel like cutting cards uh has gotten a little harder over the years. Mainly because they print so many good cards to begin with. Um and they all kind of do the same thing, roughly, right? So it's a matter of, figuring out which card is best for your deck. And I feel like the old plug and play mentality of, always run for Azusa, always run for Brainstorm, you know, that kind of mentality has begun to become quite challenged in the past like year, two, like 1 to 2 years. Um,
We've gone from four brainstorms as pretty much mandatory to, play free.
yeah.
What's the worst that could
Play
happen?
two, even, like that happens a lot. Um, uh,
Hmm.
like some Hololive lists, or never mind. Hololive's a bad example because they, never mind. Hololive is a bad example. Uh, can I think of a deck that ran two brainstorms? Maybe Sal 10th. Sal 10th is like an interesting example. I think a lot of people opted to run two.
Mm-hmm.
Um, a lot of people, some people I knew are crazy and they wanted to they cut down to one, which I think is insane.
Ambitious.
But it just goes to show how, even something as good as a tap self selective brainstorm might not be as necessary to run in high counts anymore. And it's crazy to think that because we all used to like fantasize about our favorite series getting a good tap self selective brainstorm.
Shout outs to Tony Dam.
Yeah. Rip
Uh,
Monogatari.
so, for the record, I'm still of the opinion that brainstorms are completely nonsensical. They let you claw your way back into games you have absolutely no right to claw your way back into. Like, I. So, going back to Danmachi specifically, Danmachi versus Kanata Marine. This is a matchup where if Danmachi prepares well, you can starve the Hololive opponent of pretty much all their resources. Every on reverse thing, even into level 1, will not resolve. But if they just hit 2 or 3 brainstorms, suddenly all your work is for naught and they are back in the game. That is the strength of a brainstorm. It's a card that can completely overwhelm the opponent's deck building strategy, their primary goals, and specific cards they play just for your matchup. Brainstorms can overturn all of that. Brainstorms are the reason why Weiss's card advantage or card economy system is so absurdly different from basically every other card game not called Pokemon. I don't think that's an exaggeration. And
Hmm.
even that, even that is no longer unnecessary 4 of. It's not even a 3 of. Some decks play 1. I don't agree, but I can see the rationale because other cards do enough of the same thing.
Right. Um.
Example of a deck that plays less than 4 brainstorms. In fact, it's my build plays 1 brainstorm. Is 8 door Konosuba in English.
Ah.
That deck uses the Resonance Union, which is a guaranteed plus early in the game, but the selectivity is kinda trash. So in the end, you defer to the Brainstorm gods and play 1 to 2 brainstorms. The typical 8 door variant that doesn't play the level 0 Union would play more brainstorms, however, because of the other text on the brainstorm, not because you got to spam brainstorm early.
Uh,
But
right.
yep,
In a
yeah.
similar fashion, I think Kaguya is another, notable set one Kaguya, not set two. Preset
Yeah.
two.
Set one,
Preset two
set one
Kaguya.
Kaguya played maybe one Plussing Brainstorm.
I don't know if it even play. I
It's
mean, I feel like most people didn't even play one.
I think the best builds played one, exactly
Pre
one copy.
pre ban.
Uh yes, pre-ban.
Okay. Well,
So you play the two spammable brainstorms, the ones that can also pump power,
sure.
and then you play the one blue Plussing Brainstorm just as as a Hail Mary and also as a card that's not embarrassing to play turn one and clean cut back.
Sure.
People usually played it
Right.
over because people started favoring additional runners, right? Going up to like 6 at times. You just played that over like the fifth runner, basically.
Right. But the reason why, Kaguya could get away with that is because it too ran a resonance check top three plussing engine. Um
And also went like plus 17 because of its level
yeah.
0k,
Yeah, yeah.
which is
um
kind of
but that's the thing,
it's a
right?
mistake.
So cards now do more than they ever have before in less slots than they ever have before. And seems like Bushrode is content on continuing, that design trend. They are becoming ever so more adventurous when it comes to combining, thinking about different combinations of effects in a single card, expanding what cards can do at every level. They are definitely pushing the envelope. Um, Maybe
Cards
now
just
more
have
than
more
ever.
text.
Yeah, they
Even
have
the
a lot more
bad,
text.
even the bad sets like Kobayashi's Dragon Maid, that
Uh-huh.
set's probably not going to top anything. Or like, I can't actually think of a really bad set recently. Even sets like Sakura Wars and Lost Decade,
Oh
which
my
did nothing
god.
competitively, these decks still have level zero suites that are so much better than 2015 that they're basically different card games.
Right. Um and essentially what Azusa is overrated means to me now in 2022, one, I get to be smug, kind of like troll and say I was always right. I knew this was gonna happen. I didn't know it was gonna happen, but it's fun to say that. But like, more importantly, it's more of like, since cards can do so much more now, why not just be more? Like, it lets us be way more creative with deck building. It lets us be focused more on like concepts rather than like ratios, right? Uh, if all the cards are good, it's just a matter of finding which cards complement what our like our primary goal is the best. Um, and I think that's a good thing. I think people should be. That's how I'd like people to. That's how I'd like dialogue and like discussion about deck building to be about, uh more. Um, and that isn't just that doesn't it doesn't stop at Azusa, right? Like, I think there's a lot of examples of other cards that people kind of are biased towards, that they kind of prioritize without really thinking about the context of what the deck really wants to do. Um,
I think like half the cards with like archetypal names are like that, like
yeah.
Ricky, like Rize,
Oh yeah.
like money counter. Uh, you know what's funny? Money counter is very prominent, but I think that less than half of the existing money counters are actually correct to play.
Hmm.
Most of them you just should not play.
That's because they keep printing bad versions of it.
Sometimes it's because the decks just are not suited to a money counter game plan either.
That's also true. Oh yeah, I guess money counter. Ah, interesting. Yeah, I guess
Tap
money counter
counter
is
as
like,
well.
yeah, tap counter, money counter. Uh,
Uh, I don't think memory kit counters are overrated, but I also don't think they're common enough to the point where people will start rating them too highly. And there,
is it even
there is
possible for
one
counters to be overrated, man?
Leafa counters were definitely overrated.
Sure, I guess. But were they overrated? I mean, people were only running like one ever.
Bro,
They were
I
running
know
four.
you didn't play in this at this time, but the Angel Beats song I Want to Sing counter, Gurgur, is That was hell overrated. My God, people played 4 of that.
Oh, the TD counter?
Ah, no, no, the 1135, the event counter
Wait, what? That's a wait.
in Angel Beats.
I don't know what this card is.
It's a 1135 counter to any death
Oh,
trait. That's all it
the
was.
event. Oh, sorry. Yes.
Yeah. For the longest time, that brainwashed me into thinking that you could play other stuff like Blue Pendant to Nisekoi and have success. And like the funny thing is, for quite a while, the best pendant to play in Nisekoi, as the alternate to the yellow, was actually the blue one, because the red one was trash. Uh, anyway, point being, I think a lot of named things are overrated, and that's a result of people sticking to their sacred cows. I am as guilty of this as most people are. I am a strong proponent of aggressive decks and proactive decks being the default things that you should be playing when something is at stake. Evidently, that is not the mindset shared by everyone else, but I think that proactivity is just super powerful. There's a reason why Symphogear and D-Side have been so tremendously overrepresented and hated, because they're very strong, aggressive, proactive decks. And that's why I rate Ricky extremely highly. Whenever I see a Ricky, I feel like it should be in a high count as long as the deck is trying to play a strong level 1 combo. Even if it
Man,
isn't, even if the combo is mediocre, as long as you're trying to play a 1k1 soul combo, then I think Ricky is really strong.
man,
Uh,
Ricky
so
is
I,
definitely. We could talk about that next. We could make an entire episode on Ricky. Actually, what an interesting profile.
we first we got to we got to update the Ricky alignment chart to
Oh,
properly discuss what is and isn't a Ricky. Like, is Flames of Hell a Ricky?
oh God.
But anyway, so that brings us to maybe the last part of the discussion, which is going back to that original phrase. Azusa is overrated. We've kind of touched on it already, but do you think that is still the case, that the literal card Azusa right now is overrated?
Uh, yeah,
Fair enough.
yeah, dude.
What?
Okay. I'm not gonna mention
Yep.
any names, but I was talking about building Fate in English like last week, right?
Yep.
And some person was asking for help with their build, and I was like, well, if you need slots, I feel like you could probably cut an Azusa, like an Ilya Azusa. Everyone knows the card. It's a
Was he
good.
um was he playing Avenger?
Uh, no.
Okay, in that case, sure.
And the other thing is like the person was running Ilya early play, like the Ilya early play condition. So they didn't even need the blue
Blue
from
fixing
the
wasn't
Azusa.
needed.
Right. So I was just like, yeah, I mean, since it seems like you're struggling with slots, Azusa is a pretty okay cut here. It's what I would do. And some other person was just like, bruh, cut Azusa? Are you kidding me? Why not just run 0? I'm like, okay, dude. All right, dude. All right, bro.
Was it an 8 door deck?
No. Wait. Yes?
Because if it's 8 door, then fine. If it's 8 bar, I think there's still an argument that Azusa is very important.
No. I think the
I
I think
think
the
so.
costs I think the bomb is easily more core in that deck than Azusa is. I think the
I'm not
brain
arguing to cut the bomb. I think the bomb is definitely something you need. In
I think
in in
the
bar, you need 4 of the brainstorm as well.
oh, you only need 3, but like essentially the point is like there was basically very little reason to keep this card at 4. For a lot of reasons. It just like it doesn't provide it good. It's like not a useful color because you're always gonna get blue because your game plan is always to play the early play at level 2. You don't really like Fate's selectivity like as a deck is like pretty good. You know, especially compared to other decks. I think it was a bar deck actually, but the selectivity is pretty good. So if you need Azusa, in the first deck, you'll probably be able to get it even with 3 copies. and it's not like you're gonna play multiple copies in a turn. Like that doesn't really happen anymore. I think. I would hope.
Uh, I know I've
Especially
done it. Maybe
especially
it was
not
not
with.
correct, but I've done it.
I mean, yeah, we've all been that person power tripping on milling for free a bazillion times and then refreshing just because you can. But like essentially, I felt like the deck could. It just wasn't. It didn't need to be a four of. Like just looking at the context, like the deck, what it's trying to do. Like it didn't need to be a four of. But like, uh, someone disagreed with me, and it was like for a very dogmatic reason. Like, oh, it's
Basic
too
count.
good. It's too good not to run at four, etc. So I mean, yeah, people are still doing that even now. And of course, it's not gonna happen as often. As long as they keep not printing Azusas.
Mm-hmm.
We could talk about Cheery. Did you want to briefly talk about Cheery actually?
Jury sucks.
Yeah.
I mean,
it
I don't have
does.
much to say about that.
It
What do you want me to say,
does.
dude?
It does. I say that, but like, yeah. When it's like combined with some different effects, though, it's like okay, right? I would never
It
play
needs a hell of a reason to play. You need to have a hell of a reason to play a Jury.
You never play like a vanilla Cheery, obviously, unless it's like
I've
I can't
seen it
even.
done, and I think it's like not embarrassing, but it has to contribute to the game plan. For example,
Yeah,
it has to be like, for example, if you field it turn two, you have to feel like it's doing something for you. If you have a cigarettes combo, then fine, the mill is totally reasonable, and it's ditch outlet sometimes. But
you wouldn't play a vanilla one though, right?
I think I would consider it. I would definitely consider it.
It's okay. They don't even print those anymore. But like, they don't even print vanilla cherries anymore because they know that people wouldn't play them.
Yeah, sure.
I guess like what is a good example? I like the Itsuki.
Danmachi,
Oh yeah,
Danmachi
Danmachi has
literally
one.
has one.
Yeah, Danmachi
Danmachi
has one.
literally, and it doesn't get played because
Wait, what does it do?
there's no reason to play it. It's literally just a 2/5 for familiar trait.
What? Okay, nice one. I'm talking about cards like the Itsuki from Gotobu set one. That's a level 0 bomb, which I think is fairly valuable in a card like that wants to attack a level 0. There are some other Cheeries that are like pretty good. I think. I'm struggling to remember them. Oh, the Day I Became a God one, right?
I don't know about good. That card is played because you need it in order for the level 1 combo to do anything.
Yeah, I mean that's the thing. Okay, sure, but like that counts. That counts. It's also
I guess
3/5 on
so.
play. It's also 3K on play. It's not bad.
Yes. I play that deck. I thought that deck was very strong for multiple reasons. I still don't think the Chiuri is anything but a role player in that deck.
Sure. But yeah, Cheery sucks. Azusa is overrated.
So my opinion is that Azusa it's strong. If it was printed literal Azusa in a current set and the level 0 suite wasn't something profoundly ridiculous, there's a reason to consider Azusa. Totally serviceable card, certainly not a bad card, but also certainly not one that you should be chomping at the bit to put in every single deck. I play 4 Azusas in my 8-door Fate. I don't know if that's correct, but my deck is very consistent and I have no issues with it. If you play Avenger in Fate, I think you do play 4 Azusa. Otherwise,
Yes.
it's not needed, not a sacred count. And there's not really another recent set I can say it has Azusa. The funny thing is, Azusa right now is only just good enough. If you take even one bit away from the Azusa, sometimes it's really, really terrible. Like, how many of the 0/0 ditch a specific vanilla to mill
Oh
5 and
god.
give 2k to something to pseudo Azusa have there been? How many Chiuri effects have there been? How many Azusa only for level 1 plus have there been? And they're all like middling cards, nowhere near the quality of an Azusa these days. The card is excellent, but so are many other cards. And that's kind of the message we want to give today. where Azusa's great, but so is the rest of, Weiss. There's a lot to be said about what should and shouldn't be played on an ongoing basis. But Azusa is a card that you can probably cut to 3 and everything will be fine. You will live. That being said, nothing relevant has Azusa except for Fate. If you are a believer, if you aren't a believer, it's because you haven't played Fate before. And I guess Danmachi has a pseudo Azusa, which is another, card. And I think Danmachi is
Oh,
really strong.
Ilya. I guess Ilya.
Oh, in Japanese, yes.
Yeah, yeah.
Ilya
Ilya in
is
Japanese.
definitely a card. Yep.
But not top tier. You know,
No.
people aren't, banging on the table, for Ilya right now. Despite the fact that I feel like it's a really good
Because
deck, but nobody plays it.
you feel it's a good deck because it has 8 Azusas.
Well, that's true. You can run 8. Holy.
I think most people run 6.
Yeah, I mean, there's nothing better to. Oh, do they? That's a lot of
I
slots.
think so. I
Really?
think it's I think it's about
Like an
right.
8, like an 8 pants? They play
Yeah,
8
it's like a
or
yeah,
6
I think
rather.
so. I think it's 6 because it's
Wow.
like it's one of those EXP Azusas, so it's like a 5k, isn't it? It's like not embarrassing
Yeah,
to
yeah, it's
just
a
start with.
5K. I could see running. Yeah, I mean, I would have to see the list, but yeah, I mean, I guess 6 is not unreasonable,
Hmm.
but it's not
I
like
mean, the question is how much utility do you actually need? And Azusa is mostly just consistency, bit of utility. If you can find a better suite that does it without the weaknesses of Azusa, being a very mediocre level 0 play, then all the more power to you.
agreed.
All right. So I think that probably brings us to the end of the discussion today. In regards to Azusa as an archetype, it is still very strong, but the game has caught up, very much so. And as a result, we have lots of other cards that are just as good. So you can just play some of those and see how that goes. And hopefully it goes well.
Would
It
Nazusa be a
isn't.
B? Would you give it a B now if it was printed?
No, I'd give it an A.
Oh, weak.
Card is great.
I
Like
guess I
sometimes the
guess you
deck.
I guess you would have I guess you would have used to give it an S or something. Maybe I don't know.
I mean, I gave it an S when nothing else had that sort of
Yeah,
effect.
yeah, yeah.
But like to nowadays, I would say Kome is an A plus still because it just doesn't get printed. Azusa is still like an A. Maybe it's an A minus. I don't know. It's really, really good. I don't think that can be understated. But there are lots and lots of cards I would give an A to.
Yep.
And it turns out that 2 Bs can make an A very easily. And if that makes the deck better all round, then so be it. All right, so I think that brings us to the end of today's episode. Drop us a comment, give us a, contact us through any of the socials. Always happy to hear feedback. And it does sound like people are giving some good feedback. If there's anything you'd like to see, then by all means, contact us. And otherwise, I hope everyone's doing well. I hope that travel is opening back up, that people are starting to plan things a lot more, and that everyone's life is going smoothly.
Yes. I hope the same for everybody as well.
And we will see everyone next time. Thank you.
Bye.